Hello, everyone. My name is Igor Tomic, and I would like you to welcome on our episode. It's really, for me, important, and that's a good one because for me, it's really precious to have the really hands-on experience on the specific topics. And today with us is Catherine Woneis from Fingerprint. She's a vice president, and she would like to tell her story and the experience in AI fraud detection and fingerprinting on the mobile devices and the web. So, hello, Catherine. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Appreciate you having me on here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for us. And I know how important is time. And I cannot stress enough that here we are for educating people how the things are working for real. We see a lot of marketing buzz, AI trends, stable coins, everything. But what I think is really precious to have the really hands-on experience and understanding how the things are working and how they're affecting our everyday life because everything is have switched into the digital everything as banks or our experience sitting in our pockets in mobile applications. So that's important topic, although we might not even understand how it's affecting our day by day life. So, Catherine, I would like you to do maybe a short introduction to our listeners. What is your position, what you do, and what is the product that you represent?
Yes, thank you. So I am the VP of Product Management here at Fingerprint. I have about 20 years of experience in data analytics. So I started out in the world of text analytics, reading through various social media communications and so forth, moved into visual analytics, blockchain analytics, and so forth, all under the lens of helping to reduce fraud and crime and using those signals to be able to do that. Here at Fingerprint, we are working with device intelligence, also known as device fingerprinting. So basically, browsers and apps give off specific signals to help those websites and apps operate correctly. And we're reading those signals to be able to tell website and app operators, number one, if there is a returning visitor to their website or returning user of their app. And number two, are there signs that that app or that website or that browser are giving off that indicate that the person who is coming to that site or that app might have potentially fraudulent intent? So, as an example, are they trying to manipulate browser signals to try to hide their identity? Are they coming in from a VPN that's claiming to be from one location in order to subvert regulations and so forth?
That's definitely true. Thank you for a quite good explanation. And in this case, I'm trying to always go into the details, like to split the complex stuff and complicated stuff into smaller, understandable pieces. And in this case, I would like you to have your vision. Like right now, we see that Apple or other platforms they quite openly saying that there is some privacy that is tailored and designed to provide for the users on the specific platforms on iOS. And they have a lot of efforts and technology put into the anti-tracking services. So how do you think it's right now positions? Because in one way we should respect the privacy, but another way in fintechs we have to build the trust, and the trust can be achieved when we know quite a lot of information of the customer because we obliged to do the authentication, we're obliged to provide the level, decent level of the quality service. So how do you think it's right now positioned against the platforms, the device abilities, the customers, and the companies who are providing the services to those customers?
Yeah, so we are very privacy centric. It's important to note that sometimes when you talk about fingerprinting, you are talking about tracking, you're talking about trying to track people across different sites, different apps, and so forth. And we're really more interested in just trying to use it as verification that you are who you claim to be. So when we talk about authentication and so forth, the fact that you are visiting a banking site, for example, from the same phone that you always use every day, from the same location that you normally come in at, similar time of day, and so forth, that can help prove that the person logging into that banking site is actually me, in addition to my username, password, etc. So it provides that additional layer of trust that enables you to believe that I am who I claim to be.
Okay, let's chunk it up in the smaller pieces because it's definitely important and possible because when I'm authenticating to my application, we have some kind of session and I'm kind of proving that I'm this person who is authorized to use the service by providing some authentication methods. It can be multiple factors. emails, whatever, whatever. Are we talking about the process which is happening before? Because there is a process which helps to identify the fraudulent activity even before authenticating. So, are you focused more on something which is happening with authenticated sessions, or more on the steps which are way before authentication and doing the actions?
It's actually a bit of both. So when I first come to the website, you'll be able to see, for example, am I a good returning visitor or not? Do I have signs that I might have some fraudulent intent or not, even before I enter in any information? So, for example, if you see that I'm using a browser that shows signs of browser tampering, even if I then enter in the correct username and password, you might still want to challenge me if I'm coming in from an unfamiliar device that's been tampered with, and so forth. So it provides that initial view, just kind of like a peephole. When someone comes to your door, you take a look at it, you see, okay, do I recognize this person or not? Do they look suspicious? And then that can determine how you act after that point.
That's definitely true. And from my technology experience, maybe I will put a little bit of the facts. Actually, when we communicate in from our desktop or the mobile, our browser contains an information like a user agent. So with additional information that the customer is supplying, we have some technical information which is passed to the server side or to the company, which is then doing some checks with additional information. And Apple is putting a lot of efforts because we might know it's a safari, but they kind of trying to prevent us from understanding that you've been there because a lot of the data like that is sold for upselling or some kind of analytics activity. Do you think general and strategic is it right way to move? Is it something that is actually not helping to the market and platforms? Like just strategically, do you have a space for companies like big tech companies influencing and generate maybe the rules what possible or not possible? Maybe it's better to go greenfield in this case.
Yeah, so I mean, really, the reason that we're in business is that it is difficult to keep up with the constant changes, not only in privacy preserving techniques, but also in the way that these browsers are communicating with websites to help them operate correctly. So we see ourselves really in partnership with that, that we want to be able to maintain, again, that privacy where it is appropriate to do so, but then also to be able to give those signals for anti-fraud, anti-crime purposes. So trying to detect whether someone is trying to pretend to be multiple people, for example, in
Yeah.
trying to subterfuge things or trying to do an account takeover.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Another item that you mentioned is like a browser tampering. And maybe can you give like a simple example what actually it means? Like is someone is taking my laptop or how usually it's going on or what usually is happening when we can say, okay, that's the session or the browser has been tampered.
So normally browser tampering is someone who is trying to change the signals that their browser is emitting to try to pretend that they are someone that they are not, somewhere that they are not, that they are multiple people when they are not as well. So, for example, there are a set of browser techniques you can use called anti-detect browsers or multi-accounting browsers. The legitimate use of these browsers is, hey, I am representing a variety of companies as a social media professional, and I want to be able to have a different identity for each of those. However, a lot of people misuse these browsers to try to pretend to be multiple people in, for example, a credential stuffing attack and so forth. So if we see signs that one of these browsers is being used, that can then allow us to pass that along to the website operator and say, hey, you may want to take a closer look at this individual.
Okay, that totally makes sense. And instead, it kind of complex. It's really complex from the technology standpoint. So right now, I'd say it's important to highlight that we are simplifying the signals because there are a lot of browsers, and those browsers are providing different functionalities for identifying and fingerprinting and collecting the information from the browser. And sometimes even browser they have issues which are exposing more than we want. Like one of the item that I really remember in early days of internet, there was a possibility to generate the page which were providing, I don't know, top 100 websites, and the built-in into the browser functionality for cascade sheet styles was highlighting the web pages that I visited with the color. So it was a possibility to build the script which is then reading this top website colors and saying that actually Igor, who opened this 100 list, visited 80% of those sites. So it's basically allows to collect much more information that actually you would like to expose. And is this really happening like this right now, or there is a more, I don't know, spear and the shield strategies happening between browsers, what we collect, what is possible to collect?
Yeah, so basically, we're really focused on, again, collecting those things that the browser is emitting in order to make a website function properly. So, for example, what fonts are installed on the browser, or what's the screen resolution, things like that. Each person has their own unique setup. And so, we're using some of those cues to tell you, A, is this strange? Is somebody coming in from a specific geographic locale where these fonts that are installed make no sense? And so maybe they're trying to misrepresent where they're from. Or is this a browser screen configuration that seems really out of kilter of your typical visitors? Things like that. So we're trying to keep it very much in the moment at the time of visit and not about the history of where you've been or any of that as well.
Okay, that's a good approach because in this case we can compare with the context that we had before, not more the behavioral but more technology side, as it feels for me. Okay, that's really good. I would say overview, and I would like to jump maybe into the question how AI is dealing with that because we have a lot of trends right now in agentic AI in machine learning, how we can build better models which are providing in more reliable way the results for analytics. And how do you think what is the space and the ambition for AI in analytics of those activities and fingerprinting?
Yeah, so the way that our clients are using our signals is we give them a variety of signals, and this allows them to be able to tell a couple of different things. One is, how anomalous is this browser that I'm seeing visiting my site versus my usual customer base? Are there things that are going on in that browser that seem out of step with what I would expect from a normal visitor coming to my site? Secondly, by feeding in information about previous fraudulent visitors to that particular site, you can then use those signals to be able to say, do these signals look like the typical signals that fraudsters are emitting when they visit my site or not? And so we're doing a lot of work with our clients to be able to help them better understand for their particular site, what are these different things? Is something strange going on? Does this look like previous fraudulent activity, even if you've never seen this browser before, and so forth? So we're using AI to be able to do those sorts of calculations for them to be able to then help them make those decisions.
That's true, and I'm always trying to think like a forward because we see a lot of agentic AI communications happening. Like OpenAI released Atlas, and we see that a lot of actually interactions are happening right now through the ChatGPT. Right now, it's more on the baby steps flow. Like I'm asking for the information, somehow it's crunched, collected. But I assume we will face in the next few years the rise of the agentic internet browsing. So the way how we will interact with websites will be changed because it's going to be some kind of middleman sitting between us and the final website. Do you think will affect the way how we're detecting fraudulent activities? And if yes, in which way?
Definitely. So, first of all, as you've mentioned, it's important for a website operator or an app provider to understand if this agent that's coming to their site is a legitimate agent and is what they represent it to be. So, for example, something might be coming in from ChatGPT. Is this actually ChatGPT, or is it a fraudster trying to pretend to be ChatGPT? So that's the first question. The second one is that I think there's a lot of responsibility on the part of the AI agent developers to also be validating the intent of that person who is coming and entering in those commands. So if I go to ChatGPT and I'm asking it questions, it's important for OpenAI to understand, am I coming in looking like a normal, ordinary user, or am I coming in with signs of fraudulent intent? Again, am I coming in with a tampered browser? Am I coming in misrepresenting my location? Am I using a residential proxy, especially one of those residential proxies that's used by known fraudsters and so forth? And then it's important for OpenAI to be able to also invoke that trust. So based on the signals that they're seeing from my machine, can they then help send along with that signal whether or not this person, yes, it is actually coming from ChatGPT, but also how much should I trust that command that's coming through there.
Okay, okay. And you mentioned the residential proxy. And once again, Apple platform and actually other platforms right now, they're providing a lot of functionality to simulate different locations, like relay functionality in iOS and macOS, and then VPN services. I would say if you go to internet, 30% of the advertisement will be around security, stealth, navigating, like people are suggesting to use VPN when you're traveling, which I think potentially is affecting you. What do you think, is this the way how we introducing those private networks is allowing us to protect the data while traveling, or it's decreasing the ability to detect the threats? Because it's kind of the balance should be there. And are we in balance? If not, which way it's balanced into?
Yeah, so it is kind of funny because it used to be that if we detected that someone was using a VPN, then they're likely a fraudster, right? But nowadays, everyone's trying to use VPNs in order to enhance their privacy. So then it becomes a question really more of intent. If you're using a VPN to preserve your privacy, that's fine. If you're using a VPN to misrepresent, say, I'm coming in from Germany, but I'm saying that I'm from the United States, then the website operator wants to be able to use that information to then determine various things. Are they trying to take advantage of regional discounts that I only intended to be for folks from a specific location? Are they trying to get around different regulations? So, for example, there are a lot of regulations around gambling entities, other things where, hey, if you're from these countries, we cannot allow you to use our online gaming platform. So it's the combination of signals, not just, hey, are they using a VPN, but what the intent is behind that VPN or that residential proxy. Are they trying to obfuscate their location? Are they trying to come in with a username and password associated with someone who's from Palo Alto, California? But if I'm coming in from Korea, am I really that person or not? So it's more subtle than just VPN bad. It's now VPN plus intent. And what does that mean for me as an organization?
And how the intent is discovered? Because I'm trying to understand, like maybe from the customer perspective, like how do you know that there is a specific intent when I'm the customer, or there is a fraudulent intent? Because I assume they kind of going and using same browsers with the same software installed.
So we're in the business of really providing those signals to those website operators so that they can then make those intent decisions. So, for example, we might say, hey, they're using a VPN. They're saying that they're coming in from this location, but they're using these fonts. They have these fonts installed. Their time zone is set to a specific time zone. We'll tell you that information, and then you can go, okay, these things aren't quite jibing together. My fraud systems rules may want to do that. So basically, we're not replacing existing fraud solutions, but we're providing additional rich detail to make the decisions that those fraud solutions make better, more robust with more available information.
Okay, okay. Maybe if I simplify, in my head, it's more analogy that we have some kind of picture. So we made a picture of you yesterday, we're making today, and we're trying to find out what are the differences and how big are they. Like, I don't know, if you're wearing the glasses and the cap, that's okay because that's still you. But when the face and the image is a little bit even uncanny, in the uncanny way is different, and we're like, hey, you should pay attention that something is really important and has changed, and the person who is representing and claiming to be this person, it might not be the same person. So in this case, it's more suggesting and guiding rather than making the final decision. Is it, does it sound correct?
So we do a little bit of both. So number
Uh-huh.
one, if enough signals have changed between one visit and another, then we'll tell you, hey, we don't recognize this as the same returning visitor, and we'll give you a new visitor ID based on that information, along with all of those signals that then allow you to make those intelligent decisions. However, if the vast majority of signals are the same statistically, we'll be able to say, hey, we are highly confident that this is the same visitor that it was before. So it's a little bit of both.
So that helps, and I assume it reduced the integration efforts and the building the business around the signals or the information that is coming from your platform. And coming back to the AI, like we have agentic AI, we have something that allows the customer to interact differently with the internet, but what do you think is the best usage of the AI in your like business? And is it more on data analytics? Do you do more prompting for the customers? Like, what is the usage of AI on your side?
So on our side, we're really using it to be able to look at internet traffic and figure out the anomalies there. So where again are things inconsistent? Where are we seeing signals that are not typical and that might say, hey, we don't know that this action is fraudulent, but you might want to take another look at it, as well as being able to use information on just statistically when our clients are saying, hey, these are different fraudulent events. These are those sorts of things. Can we find commonalities between them to be able to help guide our clients to say, hey, this anonymous visitor to your site most likely has fraudulent intent or not? And that's really where we're using that machine learning within a client space to be able to tell them these sorts of things and to be able to give them, say, a suspect score or a potential fraud score based on that information.
Okay, that's true, and that's a good usage. Maybe we will shift a little bit to the cybercrime because we see that a lot of gray areas or even black markets they becoming much more mature and industrialized. So in this case, like a cybercrime as a service, it's getting out of the hands. It's an industry. It has a lot of tools, resources, and people involved. And how do you think how this trend is affecting your product or the businesses that are using your product? And what is the state right now? Like, is it bigger compared to the previous year? Are we having better tools to protect, or what are the challenges that we're facing maybe this year and the next year compared to previous decade?
Yeah, we're seeing a couple of different things as it's affecting fraudster techniques. So, number one, it is helping them to be able to execute more actions, even if they're not technically savvy. So, for example, gone are the days when you would get an email in your inbox and you could immediately tell that it was fraudulent. You could tell it because it had various typos, it had grammatical errors, things just didn't jive anymore. And now it's allowing them to create much more realistic, human sounding communications. It even goes so far as to deep fakes, being able to do voice cloning. I heard some advice the other day that says, hey, you should have a code word with members of your family so that if you get that phone call and it says, hey, I'm your son, I've been in an auto accident, you need to ask them, hey, what's the code word so that you can tell, is that really your son or not? So that's one level, is that AI has really helped with the sophistication of these different techniques and so forth. The second one is in really helping these fraudsters to scale their operations as well. You no longer have to know how to program to be able to tell something, hey, go to all of these sites and extract this information for me. You can just do that using a natural language prompt and be able to get the information back much more quickly. So it's helping them both in sophistication and in scale. We're seeing now about 41% of all attacks on financial institutions are AI driven in some way, in one of those two ways.
And when do you mean, or what do you mean by AI usage? Because my assumption that those attacks they executed on the technical side. Usually, it's by cloning the wallet or the mobile application or using the APIs. What is the role of AI in those cases?
Yeah, you can go to a lot of these services, not only open services that normal people hear about, but even things that are specialized. So you talked about fraud as a service. There are services like Fraud GPT, various deepfake services, and so forth, where you can go there and just in natural language, the same way that I can say, "Hey, help me improve the tone of this communication to sound more positive and collaborative." You can go in there and say, "Hey, help me to be able to access this website and achieve these different types of things, or help me generate an image using these different inputs to be able to do this." So in much the same way that we're using it, these fraudsters are using these specialized services to be able to do that in the same way. And we're seeing a proliferation of these shadow services.
So it's safe to say that the optimizing their business process is something that took a lot of efforts and a lot of manual work. Right now, can be automated with the tools, and it's in the field of generative UI AI. So something which can be created as an image or a proof of address, or I don't know, some kind of documents. They can be faked and digitalized in quite easy way with the AI. But is there anything that we see from the technology standpoint? Like, I'm in IT security for over 20 years, and the digital products, they still communicating over the internet, the protocols that has been designed like 30, 40 years ago. And do we see that those protocol somehow affected by it? Like the data is for sure, like the voice can be tempered. You can generate audio which is sounding like me without just having the samples of my voice. But do we have anything from the technology standpoint challenged by the new tools as AI, like I don't know, browser, which can be somehow hacked and providing us additional access using AI tools on the fraudulent as a service?
Yeah, so I mean, we're seeing AI being used on the other side as well with these different fraud tools and so forth, being able to learn from attacks, learn from things that have happened before to be able to raise those types of flags and those types of signs. So, looking for things like camera injection attacks, looking for a variety of other signals. AI can be used on the other side too. So, we've got sort of AI agents on both sides acting on both the side of good and the side of evil.
Okay, okay, I got it. Another type of the attack that I'm thinking, like with the fingerprinting, like there is a flow when I have my device, which I authorized, I bought, I'm using, and if some ransomware is installed or somehow got in my device, there are two ways how they usually can act after that. So one, they copy my data and trying to simulate my access to the specific service, let's say my banking account, from another device, from another location, and that helps a lot, like analyzing those slightly differences which are happening. Like I'm using Mac, I'm using Safari, but then someone from Mac in similar location, I don't know, a little bit of the same region, is trying to log in on Mac using Chrome, and that's kind of is helping us to detect those fingerprints and see the difference. But there is a type of attack which is much more sophisticated when the computer is infected with the rootkits, and those rootkits, they kind of acting sometimes like as installed plugins to the infrastructure that you're using. So you're logging into your bank, that's still you, and you have a session. But when the session is activated, those plugins then can interact with APIs or the bank on your behalf because you are authenticated, you have a session. Do you have anything to detect those attacks? And if you see them, are they something that is growing on the market? Like maybe what is even the split between those two approaches?
Yeah, I think the complicated part that's coming into play now is that it used to be that if you saw an automation logging in as you onto, say, a banking website, you would immediately just want to block that automation. All bots are bad. Anyone trying to do this. And we do the same thing, right? We could tell you,
Yeah,
hey, there's markers that this isn't actually an individual typing in this stuff. This is actually a bot that's coming in and trying to do these things. As AI agents start to grow, now not all bots are bad. And so
yeah,
that's really the distinction that we're trying to also work on with our partners is how can you differentiate good automation, good beneficial automation from automation that's done by a fraudster? And there are specific signals that we won't talk about here
yeah.
that we can
We are
use
not
to
asking
help
for NDA
differentiate
disclosure.
those. But
Yeah.
that's something that definitely we're seeing. There's a lot more of that subtlety that will be required over time as more and more visitors to your site are automations legitimately acting on behalf of users versus automations that are acting on behalf of fraudsters that are trying to pretend to be users.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And that what I'm thinking, like the complexity in infrastructure and the way how we're interacting with our products is becoming crazy because we have the bunch of the devices because usually nowadays you might have not in one device, mobile device, and you have iPads, you have iPhones, and then you're, I don't know, you're couch surfing and then you are overviewing something with a roaming device and then you hop into the laptop and then you're trying to watch your, I don't know, balance. And another question which is kind of can be extrapolated from that, right now we see the rise of the technologies as open banking, open finance, which are usually providing APIs. So by design they design it not for the human interaction but more program to program. Do you think that's like the cracks which will allow to somehow manipulate? Because by design, it's not something that as a customer is going to access because let's assume I have a budgeting application and I would like to aggregate my accounts transaction and provide me financial visibility. And that's one thing which I'm in the case when I'm logging into my bank account and extracting the transaction history, or another way when I'm granted my access to the budgeting application and then it goes. What is the split like? Do you see the rise of the APIs to APS interaction? And if yes, is it going to be, I don't know, what is your projection for usage, the cases like that?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly do see some automated API to API action going on there. It's not the area that we're currently focused on. We're really still focused on that. And I think it's going to take several years for that sort of thing to happen, particularly in the B2C space. There's definitely
Yeah.
B2B systems that operate with one another, and we're working with our identity partners and providers to make sure that, again, those are trusted interactions between those AI. But we're really more focused on browser interactions, app interactions that happen at that top layer.
Okay, I understand that. From my side, maybe it's all the questions for today. I kind of covered all the topics. Maybe the last one from my side. I'm trying to go this way recently. Like, what is the question that I didn't ask you today? But what would be the question that you think I should ask you today?
I think the main question is really, and you started out with that, is what are various financial services and banking companies most concerned with? And one of the things that we didn't touch on today is the notion of social engineering. So we are still seeing that even with the rise of AI agents and so forth, people are still the weakest link. There's still a lot of education that we need to do with people to make sure that they're not falling for these types of scams and so forth. And we're certainly looking for clues that could tell, for example, financial institutions, hey, is this person operating under duress? So there's
Yeah.
some interesting psychological signals that we can start looking at in terms of how that expresses itself in browser interactions and so forth that I think we've also just scratched the surface of.
That's interesting point because I finished my master's degree quite a long time ago, and one the axiom that has been given to security specialists that always, and it's definitely always, human is the weakest link in the technology, because technology, it works by the rules, and when you're designing the system you kind of know all that's in and out. Maybe a good example to our listeners, engineers are not taking for granted the weakest points. Like if we have the password, the attack on the password should be the most number of checks against those numbers. So it's called brute force attack. If the possible length, I don't know, is 8 characters, you need to go through all 8 characters and all the combinations, which make us brute force. But the axiom is that humans, they all have their keys. Someone is falling into the some information, like as you made an example, I'm an accident, and you're acting emotionally for providing information or doing the steps that the fraudulent activity is expecting you to do. So my assumption that through the years we will see a lot of target attacks on people, because we're living in a world where it's really hard to distinguish what we see through the glasses of our screens, and the technology becomes better because we have better instruments, better computational power, better even hardware devices possibilities like lidars reading that I'm the person who's opening the device. But human are not becoming better. We don't have any upgrades or firmware updates. So that's a really interesting point, and thank you for putting this into the episode. So we kind of naturally coming to the end. I would like you to thank you for the participation. It's really insightful discussion, and I think our listeners learned a lot. Please subscribe, and I'm giving you the final words. Maybe you would like to say something.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for having me here to talk about it. I think what I would want to emphasize to folks is that not all browser and device fingerprinting is bad. We're not all out to track you everywhere across the
Yeah.
internet. We're really in the business to protect you against fraud and fraudulent intent. So thank you for letting me come here today to talk about that.
And I would like maybe to add a closing phrase. In administration or managing the data, there is a saying that there are only two types of people who are doing the backups and who are already doing backups. So I think it's not enough to stress that we're living in a world where the digital security is important. and you should do a lot of conscious decision when you're interacting in different situations, and always put the critical thinking, what I'm doing, how it's going to affect me, and what actually the intents of those interactions that I'm facing right now. So be safe, make sure that you're doing great things, and please join for our next episodes.